Okay, I'm going to share my presentation here. So my name is Joaquim, and I'm going to present you a lecture, a presentation about an approach I've been developing and practicing, which I call the 3 pillars of well-being. So I'm working at the university. I'm an engineer, and but I've also been practicing macrobiotics, and my interests are in the field of macrobiotics, of course, but also physical activity, and also spirituality, meditation. So this approach is composed of 3 important aspects of our life, which are food as diet, intended as diet, activity, and spirituality. And I'm going to, well, this is the plan for my presentation. And the question that I posed to myself some years ago was this: to stay healthy, be well, and have a good management of your individual energy, which variables should you consider and use? What is the appropriate and complete minimal core variables to consider and use? And I've been finding that with my practice, there are 3 aspects, very important aspects. The first is, of course, food. So diet, of course, because we have to eat to be alive. Another aspect is activity. So we have to move. We have a body. We have muscles and bones. So we have to be active. And another aspect, which is somewhat non-material, which is spirituality. So I usually depict this in a triangle way, picture, with food and activity at the base of the triangle, and spirituality at the top. Okay, this is because I see food and activity as more material or more physical things than spirituality, like this. So there's some kind of separation, but really there is no separation. There is a continuum. For instance, in the dimension of food, you can eat solid food. Okay, solid food. You can eat liquid food, so a kind of less material. Gas, you breathe, you need oxygen, so it is a kind of food for you. And also to absorb vibration from the environment. So there's a continuum in food from the more material, more physical things to the more non-material things. Also, in the side of the activity dimension, we can understand that there are more intense activities. For instance, carrying loads, carrying weights, jumping, throwing things, running, and less or lighter activities like walking, dancing, and less heavier activities like hatha yoga, pilates. These are examples, okay? Chanting, mantras, and in extreme meditation, okay? There's 2 kinds of meditation here. I'll explain this later, okay? So the question will be for me, and I've been finding things and practicing and developing this approach. And the real question is how to interconnect and apply to practical situations and with specific objectives, different options of these 3 dimensions: food, activity, and spirituality. with these nuances. Well, of course, we prefer natural food, healthy food, simple and practical food. And in the activity dimension, well, I'll justify this intense physical exercise, focus on working with gravity and planet exercise. I'll justify this, okay? And also, in the dimension of spirituality, a simple, non-religious, practical approach to spirituality, okay? Of course, in order to be healthy and happy, and also have some kind of anti-aging process going on, okay? So this approach has three components, three pillars. I call them three pillars. The first is the food as diet, okay? And with food, much of the inspiration is taken from macrobiotics, applied macrobiotics, adjusted macrobiotics to different situations, okay? And we, of course, prefer food in whole form, food rich in natural fiber, organic natural food, more traditional food processing, complex carbohydrates, etc., vegetable quality protein, less fat. This is very important. Adjustments according to climate, seasons, constitution, condition of the person, and activity. This is very important. And of course, sex and age. Okay. And in this dimension, this is, like I said, very inspired in macrobiotics. So we have main components like whole grains and its derivatives, soup, vegetables, beans and its derivatives like tempeh, tofu, etc., seaweed, seasonings, condiments, pickles, garnishes, and secondary components, which are sometimes optional components like animal food, fruit, juices, nuts and seeds, snacks and desserts, beverage. So this is all, of course, inspired in macrobiotics. And also other elements which are not properly components, but are elements that are somewhat present in the food, in the diet, okay, like for instance, cooking processes, and water, fire, pressure, time that are employed in cooking processes, of course. Medicinal plants, supplementation, chewing, etc. And to eat or not to eat, like doing fasting, okay? So this is, in summary, let's say, the whole picture of food and diet, of course, natural food. And to guide us in organizing the diet, I feel we have some important things to use. And one important thing is a phenomena that is pervasive in all universe, which is gravity. Gravity is very important and is a kind of phenomena that is very constructive and creative in the material world. It creates everything. And some shapes and forms that are visible in the nature and in universe, like, for instance, in the planet, ocean currents, the seashells, even in our body, the DNA molecule, well, the Milky Way galaxy, the galaxies are spiralical in form, and this is created by gravity. In plants, in our body, some proportions in our body, which are of course related to gravity and to specific parameters in our planet, for instance, our dimensions, our proportions, head to body, the teeth, the proportions between the canines and the rest of the number of the whole teeth, the teeth, and the proportions in the waves. This all is created by gravity, and these things here are specific to our planet. And gravity at the surface of the planet locally translates into a play between two forces, two opposite and complementary forces, which are we call usually yang and yin in the Eastern tradition and philosophy. And yang is a kind of downwards centripetal force, and yin is a kind of centrifugal upwards force. And this is all, this yin force is normally created by the rotation of our planet. Not only, but mainly. So it's stronger in the equator and weaker in the poles, okay? And yang is a very strong force. There is a proportion in our planet, it's 1:7, yang to yin, okay? That proportion is visible in our body and other things, okay? And this interplay in these two forces translates to the constitution of the beings, plants, and animals in the planet. So there is some beings that absorb more yang force, others that absorb more yin force. In general, vegetable plants, vegetable beings are more yin, more passive, more expansive, and animal beings are more active and more yang. They have autonomy, they can move, okay? They have a more concentrated energy. And also we can see, for instance, in the plant kingdom, in the plants, in this example, that it's a carrot. If they absorb more yang force, they grow more downwards. They have more root than leaves. And if they absorb more yin force, they will have longer leaves and less roots. Okay, this is well, in the animals, these proportions are more complex. Okay, but this is to say that these two forces can be that have influence in the constitution of the beings, the vegetable and the animal kingdom, can be a guide to organize your diet. Okay, so food, if you take the animals and plants as food, you can see that you can absorb their energy, which would be more yang or more yin. And this is a map taken from a book of Michio Kushi, which classifies a variety of food, vegetables, and animals as more yang or more yin. Okay, so you see here in the yang side.
Can somebody please turn off their microphone? Hello?
You see in the yang side of this map, you see more animal food, and in the inside you see more vegetable food, and in the center you see the cereals, okay, wheat, rice, buckwheat, etc. Okay, so this can guide us to organize a diet. For instance, if you want to be more active in general, you eat more yang. If you want to be more spiritual or not passive, you eat more predominantly in diet. Okay, but this is not so simple, because usually when you are very active, you need a very variable diet, and you need more protein and more seasonings and etc. And if you want to be a very spiritual person, you have to have a more central diet around cereals. Okay, so I'll give you an example and take this as an example, as a suggestion, not a dogma or a prescription of a less physical, less active, and more spiritual way of life, a diet for this condition, for this more spiritual way of life or less active, okay, which would be a completely vegetarian diet, okay, and this depicts here main dishes of the main meals with vegetables, beans and seaweeds, whole grains, and of course soup and dessert. And this would be for the main meals. And if you have you can have here breakfast, which is a lighter meal, and if you want to have light meals between the main meals, that should this is the option, okay. But for a more physical, more active way of life, you should have a more variable diet, and also possibly with other sources of protein, for instance, like animal food, okay. And this is a suggestion for actually the difference is in the animal food here, okay. And there's two sources of protein: animal food and beans and seaweeds. This is my experience with intense physical activity. This gives very good results, okay. So these are suggestions, not dogmas or prescriptions, okay. So very different, a very different diets for the very different ways of life, okay. So this is an example. And for the activity, for the other dimension of activity in the three pillars, so in the modern world, usually activity means physical exercise, because today almost all physical tasks are made by machines. So, and we have a body, we have muscles and bones, so you have to do some kind of activity to maintain this system, our body, okay. So we do physical exercise, and physical exercise is very good because it stimulates blood and lymph circulation, develops muscles, increases metabolism, and causes, and this is very important, a kind of anti-aging effect, because it causes good hormonal changes in the blood. And of course, as long as it's properly dosed and with good quality food and good quality rest, of course. And first, in this kind of dimension, the activity, some definitions, okay? What is physical activity? What is physical exercise? What is commonly accepted as physical exercise? So physical activity is anything that makes the body move and burn calories, okay? So like day-to-day activities, walking to the supermarket, holding your kids, gardening, of course, also walking, jogging, go hiking, etc. Or practicing a sport is physical activity. But what is physical exercise? Normally, the meaning of these terms is physical activity for the effect it produces in the moment. So jogging, go hiking, play football with friends on Saturday. Of course, it can include practicing a sport or training in the gym, but usually the meaning of physical exercise is some kind of exercise which is ephemeral, not doing systematically, okay? So it's something that makes you sweat, get tired, or your muscles get sore, but it's not systematical. Other different concept is training, which is regular and systematic physical activity with some goal, okay? Some goal, for instance, in respect to certain generic physical parameters like muscle strength or velocity or endurance, okay? And there is also the concept of a training event, which is called a workout, okay? A still different concept is practice, which is the execution of specific patterns of movements in order to acquire a skill in a specific physical activity, for instance, a sport. And these two things, training and practice, can be complementary, okay? This is used in training sports training, okay? And given these definitions, we should look at exercise types. There is two kinds of exercise types according to the way as the energy at cellular level is used. At cellular level, at the level of the muscle cells, the muscle fibers, the body uses a molecule named ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is supplies energy to the muscles, okay? But there are essentially two different regimes of using ATP. For instance, with intense activity, the activity present in the muscles is rapidly exhausted, okay? So when we do high intensity exercises, we cannot do them for much time because the ATP is almost exhausted in some seconds, okay? But with other kind of exercises, which are called aerobic, so there is anaerobic and aerobic. This kind of exercises can be executed during more time and usually are slower and repetitive and longer duration, of course. So these two different regimes, two different kinds of exercise type. There is the low intensity and high intensity, aerobic and anaerobic, okay? Usually aerobic is performed in the presence of oxygen. And anaerobic, there's no time to use oxygen enough to provide ATP for this kind of exercise, okay? So examples are in the anaerobic side, rest, walk, mild running, so jogging, and in the anaerobic side, intense running, high-speed running like sprinting, and lifting things, throwing things like weights, okay? So these two kinds of exercise type, okay? About the responses to physical exercise during and after physical exercise in order to mobilize energy sources, several hormonal changes occur in the blood, in the body. With the production of these two hormones, this is the most important hormones, growth hormone and testosterone hormone. Growth hormone is produced in the pituitary gland and is known to increase basal metabolism and to have a direct stimulation of cellular metabolism and acting also in the metabolism of fats, making them available for energy production. Also, it increases bone and cartilage growth and cell reproduction and protein deposition in cells. Also, another thing, it stimulates the immune system and drives the metabolism toward fat utilization, as I said. Also associated with some anti-aging effect, the growth hormone. Okay, testosterone is secreted in the adrenal cortex and in the testicles and in the ovaries in the woman. and increases basal metabolism, also stimulates protein synthesis and tissue growth, and is also associated with neuromuscular efficiency, bone growth, metabolic rate, red blood cells production, and mineral balance, and psychologically is associated with a positive attitude, proactivity, and optimism. So these are good hormones, and the natural way of increasing them in your body is to make to do exercise, physical exercise, normally intense physical exercise. This is because mainly these hormones are increased in the blood with intense anaerobic exercise. Okay, these are examples. Okay, so both aerobic and anaerobic exercise types have a role in maintaining regular weight and appetite, but intense exercise is by far the most efficient, with effects both during and after exercise. Intense physical exercise is typically anaerobic, but also includes an aerobic component, because during recovery between sets of exercises, there's a need to replace the spent ATP, okay, to supply energy. And also, intense physical exercise has a structural or constitutional effect, not only a surface effect. And it can be regulated to be progressive with cumulative effects. And this kind of progressiveness can be implemented using variable resistance, for instance, gravity, with weights, or dragging forces, or elastic artifacts, or springs, or some kind of resistance, okay? Also, progressiveness can be attained with a strategical use of a phenomena, which is a kind of reaction of the organisms and our organism, which is the general adaptation syndrome, which is an adaptation, a kind of adaptation that the body exhibits when has a stress stimulus. And this is discovered by this endocrinologist, Hungarian endocrinologist in the years 30, okay? So what is this? This is a kind of reaction of adaptation of the organism to a stress of some kind, for instance, a psychological stress, a bacteriological attack, for instance, a training event, okay? For instance, suppose you want to increase your strength, your muscular strength, okay? So you're going to a gym and train, okay? Have some sequence of training events, workouts, okay? And this is here the figure that represents a very interesting phenomena of the organisms that have adaptation. If you have here in time a training event, a workout, your strength will go down temporarily, then there will be a recovery, and 1 or 2 days after, there is a phenomenon of supercompensation, which is your strength will increase more than at the beginning, okay? So if there is no more training events, it will decrease until 0, as was before, okay? But if you place here a training event, you can make this curve repeat and have a curve of supercompensation after this one, and you can repeat this with a sequence of training events. So you can progress in strength, okay? And this is actually used in sports training, okay? So you can make your muscular qualities, strength or velocity or endurance, evolve over time indefinitely. Well, not literally indefinitely, until your genetic limit, of course. Okay. So continuing, the activity component of the 3 pillars is used here to start a process of progressive improvement of health and well-being in parallel with healthy eating and rest and some kind of spirituality. And also trigger an anti-aging process because of those things that occur in the blood with hormones, which have a very beneficial effect, okay? And also, of course, the usual goal of the physical exercise is to maintain and increase the capabilities of the skeletal muscle system, okay? And I'll give you suggestions and examples about this kind of exercise, which is has these attributes: intense physical exercise, progressive exercise, working with gravity, and using natural and comprehensive movement patterns, and using exercise that act on multi-joints, so act on different joints in the body and for bigger muscle groups in the body. So 3 suggestions in the course of I give of the 3 pillars of the well-being. I usually suggest these three training proposals, and I'll show examples of the first 2. The first is maintenance, which is a very light training program, okay? So it's like training 2 to 3 times a week and using exercise based on endurance, like running, swimming, and of course, optionally hatha yoga, pilates, or qigong, okay? This is more suitable for maintenance and eventually for a more spiritual and contemplative life, or in general, a less active life, okay? If practiced regularly, fitness will tend to be maintained or slightly improved and does not have much of the advantage of intense physical exercise, okay? So this is one option. Other option, which is more intense, is using some kind of exercises that manipulate gravity, for instance, with weights, and training 2 to 3 times a week, and using a kind of sets and repetitions program with this kind of exercise. I'll explain in a minute this exercise: the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift, with sets of repetitions aiming to 70 to 75% of your maximum of load, okay? So
Joaquim, can you go back 1 slide? The one right before this, I missed.
Sure, okay.
Yes, that one.
Okay.
Thank you, got it.
Okay, this is a different kind of training. So we have this list of exercises, including a general warm-up to warm up all the joints of the body and the muscles, and then squat exercise with 3 to 4 sets of 10 repetitions with 0 weight, then with 40%, then with 55%, just for a specific warm-up. Then 3 sets of 10 repetitions with 70%. So these are the actual work sets. So then the bench press with sets of warm-up 2 and 3 sets, 3 work sets with 70%, 10 repetitions too. And the deadlift, which would use 1 set for warm-up with 50% of the 1 repetition maximum, and 1 work set with 70%, with 10 repetitions. And then exercise for the abdominal zone with trunk flexion, 15 repetitions with no weight, and hip flexion with 15 repetitions with no weight. I won't go in too much details because there is no time, of course. And then this will terminate with relaxation, which could include stretching and some kind of 1 to 2 minutes of meditation to relax, okay? So a brief explanation of these exercises, which are used in weightlifting, powerlifting, bodybuilding, etc. So it's exercise with barbells. Okay. The squat is this kind of exercise. It is focused on legs and back, and it's mainly consists in flexing your legs and trunk with a barbell in your back. Okay. One rule is that you may should maintain your back flat. Okay. Otherwise, you could get injuries from this exercise. Also, the other exercise is the bench press, which is done in a bench with a barbell, which consists basically in flexing your arms. So this exercise develops the arms and the trunk, the chest. Okay. And another exercise, which is the deadlift, basically consists in lifting a bar from the floor, extending your legs and back, and maintaining always the back flat. Okay. So these exercises are very general and can be found in many natural movements. For instance, the squat is found in squatting and lifting from the position of seated. And the deadlift is found in natural movements, or lifting something, some weight from floor. Okay, so this is the general exercises for used normally in the gyms for bodybuilding or powerlifting or weightlifting. There are exercises to support muscular development. And I suggest some kind of activity for a specific situation for transition to macrobiotics. It's, in my opinion, if you are doing a transition to macrobiotics, you should not do very intense physical exercise. You should concentrate on the dimension of food and diet, okay? So, but you can do some light exercise, you should do, okay? And this is a proposal for a transition to macrobiotics. So it's a low intensity kind of training, okay? So training frequency 2 to 3 times a week. It's low intensity, simple and comprehensive exercises, can be combined with different sessions, for instance, with Hatha Yoga or Qigong. And this is my suggestion, which includes a warm-up, squats. I'll show you. I have videos with me doing the exercise. This is a general warm-up. So the main idea is to warm all the joints of the body and the muscles, and prepare the body to more intense exercises. Okay, I'll show you in a minute to the following exercise, which is squats. You can do 2 to 3 sets of 10 repetitions, no weights, just a stick. Okay, this is the squat. And after the squat, for the abdominal zone, a dynamic plank, which is a plank that has some movement, is not purely static. 1 to 2 sets of 20 repetitions, and this dynamic with dynamic plank with a ball, the Swiss ball. Okay. And finally, also for the abdominal zone, a kind of crunch, which is the reverse crunch. 1 to 3 sets of 15 to 20 repetitions, okay? So I'm going to continue. And finally, spirituality, which is the third component. I don't know if I have much time. Cannot. Do we have time?
You've
5 minutes, no?
5 minutes. 5 minutes,
Okay,
please.
okay. I'll try to be brief, okay? So this is the last component. And what is spirituality? Well, this is a Wikipedia definition. Human tendency to seek meaning for life through concepts that transcend the tangible. Well, where does this come from? Well, this is some kind of near the top component, yeah. So these things, meditation and hatha yoga, are here near the top, okay? But where does this tendency comes? Well, in the words of and in the picture of Michio Kushi, he said that we have a memory because we have a memory of the infinity. We came from infinity and across all these worlds, the polarization world, the vibration world, the pre-atomic world, the elements, the vegetables, the animal, and we were born, and we are now here, and we have some kind of memory of the infinity, and we have also some kind of memory of the future where we are going to, because we'll cross all these words in the reverse process of spiritualization. Okay, so this is possibly the reason why we feel that there is a time and a place with no time in no place, which is spirituality, something that transcends us and transcends our body and our life. Okay, so but I feel that in my experience there is two paths to spirituality. There is the outer path, so it's the person's outer life, the path of life with others in society, the dreams or big goals, the achievements. This is a scope outside the person. And there is the inner path, the person's inner life, the contact with this individual interiority, okay? The contemplation, the mysticism. So this is the inner scope of the person. And also in the ancient wisdom of the Hinduism, the Vedanta Upanishad spiritual tradition, there were three kinds of ways of yogas. Well, of course, there was hatha yoga. It was a preparation, a physical preparation. It's outside of the equation, but it's a preparation. Okay, it's a karma yoga. It's a part of action. The bhakti yoga, a part of devotion, which is present in much religions, and the gnani yoga, which is more knowledge and philosophical wisdom. Okay, and this is the outer path, and there is the inner path, which is like it's as many names, but one name is Raja Yoga, which is the inner path. Okay, and in this inner path, I feel, in my experience, that there are two kinds of spiritual practices: the ones based on activity and the ones based on rest, which are normally the spiritual practices by default. We consider them by default, the spiritual practices by default. Okay. The spiritual practice based on activity would be, for instance, some kind of activity, for instance, walking the forest, okay, for instance, and some exercises based on balance, for instance, some yoga, hatha yoga exercises like the inverted posture or the tree posture are exercises based on balance that can be used for meditation on action, okay. Other kinds of activities like origami, for instance, or other day-to-day activities also. And the spiritual practices by default, which are those based on rest, okay? Both, of course, but especially those based on rest can be used to reduce stress and achieve quality rest and sleep and raise the level of consciousness, of course, which is the traditional goal of the spiritual practices. So I propose these three kinds of practices, and I'll give an example of the first. The first practice is which I called a kind of spiritual practice, or meditation technique of type 1. It's based on the here and now, concentrating in your body or some other kind of thing like sounds or visions or lights, and in the moment, in the present moment, okay? And other kinds of spiritual practices are different, because I call them the type 2 and or beyond eternity, which are based not on presence but on absence, okay? And these are practices that are based on inner senses like vision and hearing, okay? I'll give you an example of the first practice, and this is a very well-known spiritual practice based on breathing, and is a relative of mindfulness, and it consists with the body and the mind still and relaxed, watching the breath, okay? Just that, following the cycle of breath without changing it, and stay there concentrated in that phenomenon, okay? Pay attention to the breath. So that's an example of a very well-known spiritual practice, okay? So this will terminate my presentation, and I'll give you here some references I have, which are, of course, references from Macrobiotics, the book of Macrobiotics of Michio Kushi, an earlier edition in Portuguese of the book of Macrobiotics, the book of Doing, where many of the, at least these three spiritual practices are in this book. The spiritual practices I have presented are in this book, and much other spiritual practices are here in this book. This is a very good book of Michio Kushi. A book about fasting. These 4 books of a very well-known Portuguese medical doctor, Manuel Pinto Coelho, which are based on the medicine of anti-aging. This book is a very well-known hit. It means chegar novo a velho. It means in English, or should I translate it, how to arrive younger to old age. And also another books about anti-aging, and this book is about anti-aging too. Books about physical exercise, especially with resistant training, so weights, and a book of yoga of Paramahansa Yogananda, Autobiography of a Yogi, and these are my main references. So if I have time, I would like to show you some other presentations I'll do. This is my contacts. If you like this approach, please give me suggestions if you want to this email or this phone, WhatsApp, with WhatsApp, okay? And other presentations I give, for instance, are napkin origami. I'm giving a course on napkin origami briefly in Portugal, and also the course of the 3 pillars of well-being, which is a course that is with 3 sessions and given face-to-face, 3 sessions. The first session is based on natural food. The second session is based on physical exercise, and the third session is centered on spirituality. So this is the course of the 3 pillars of well-being, of which this presentation is a summary, a resume, okay? So this is the end, okay? Thank you. If you have any questions or other thing I can answer.
Joaquim, close for a minute your sharing. That's great. So we can get a chance to see you. Hang on just a minute. So I would like to ask a question briefly, and then I want to be sure to give our listeners a break before Donna begins. You said something about applied macrobiotics. What do you mean by that term?
I mean to apply principles of food and diet to specific situations of, for instance, extreme intense activity, okay, or for instance, a way of life based on meditation and spirituality, which is very different. So this is the meaning of applied macrobiotics. Okay, you have to adjust your diet to live, to be more active or less active and more spiritual. You know, that's the meaning I intend for applied macrobiotics. Okay. I see that there's also a question about ATP. No?
Yes.
So, what's the question? ATP is a molecule which gives energy to the muscles, to the muscle fibers, the muscle cells, and normally is present in some amount in the cells, in the muscle cells. And this amount is limited. So when you do intense physical exercise, rapidly ATP is exhausted. This is because if you want to do, for instance, a set of 1 repetition for your maximum weight you can do in the squat, for instance, or a sprint with high velocity, you can't do it so much time, you know. It's very short in duration because ATP rapidly exhausts. So you want to, but if you rest some time and repeat the exercise, you are able to, because ATP is produced by the organism. It takes some time. This is in the phenomenon in very intense physical exercise. But there are other kind of exercise, which is lighter exercise. You can do repeatedly more with more time, you know, because the ATP can be regularly produced in that time. It's different. So there is the distinction between aerobic and low intensity and longer duration exercise, and anaerobic, very intense, short duration exercise, you know. And ATP in very intense exercise is rapidly exhausted. But intense physical exercise has many benefits, like the hormonal question, you know. So, and from the hormonal that is balance that is created in the blood comes the anti-aging effect, you know.
All right.
So I think I've responded to the question about applied macrobiotics is very important, because I've learned in my practice that I you know, in the 80s I was a weightlifter. I practiced weightlifting, you know, so I learned how to adapt my food, the diet, to the intense physical exercise. Okay, so also I have practiced meditation, so I know that it's impossible to practice meditation if you eat too much protein, too much salt, too much seasonings, because you won't stand still, you know, and your mind won't stop. So different diets for different situations. This is applied macrobiotics. This is the meaning of the applied macrobiotics term. Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Well, it remains for me only to thank you. It's really you can see you've put a lot of understanding and energy into this, and there's really a lot to it. So
thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Jeanette, for this opportunity.